Okay, so you're at the pharmacy, right? And you look at all the medicines, some are pills, some are liquids, others are creams or even injections. Have you ever stopped and wondered why? It's not random, not at all. There is some seriously cool science behind why a medicine comes in the form that it does. So let's get into it.
I mean, it's a totally fair question. Why would anyone choose a painful shot when you could just swallow a simple pill? Well, the answer has nothing to do with convenience. It's all about making sure that medicine can actually survive the journey and get the job done right.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's use an analogy. Picture your body as having two major highways that a medicine can travel on. The highway it takes changes, well, everything. It determines how it's made, how fast it works, you name it. So let's hit the road and check out highway number 1.
So our first highway is called the enteral route. And enteral is really just a fancy way of saying it travels through your gastrointestinal tract. Yep, your entire digestive system.
And this highway it's a big one. It covers a ton of ground, from anything you swallow to other methods that use the digestive tract. It is by far the most common route for medicines.
The busiest lane on this highway?
Good old oral administration. Just swallowing a pill. But you know what? It's a surprisingly tough trip. That medicine has to survive the brutal, highly acidic environment of your stomach. We're talking a pH of like 1 or 2. That's like an acid bath. A lot of drugs just can't make it through that. Now this brings us to a really key choice: liquid or solid. Think of it this way: a liquid medicine is like a pre-made meal. It's already dissolved and ready to absorb, so it works faster. But a pill? That's more like IKEA furniture. Your body has to do the work of breaking it down and dissolving it before the medicine can even think about starting its journey. And you might think, liquid is liquid, right? Not even close. Each type is a specially designed vehicle. Got a drug that tastes awful? Put it in a sugary syrup to mask the taste. But what if the drug doesn't dissolve in water? Well, that's where an elixir comes in, using alcohol as a co-solvent. And tinctures and spirits, they use even more alcohol for really specific, hard-to-dissolve substances. See? Every single choice is made for a reason.
Then you've got these clever things called suspensions. These are for drugs that don't dissolve at all. The tiny drug particles are just suspended, floating in the liquid. This is great for certain medications, and especially for kids or adults who just can't swallow pills. But here's the catch: if you don't shake the bottle really well, those particles sink to the bottom, and you could end up getting way too much or way too little medicine in one dose. That shake well label is not a suggestion.
Okay, so what happens if that long, winding enteral route is just too slow, or if the stomach acid would just destroy the drug? Well, that's when doctors switch to our second highway, the parenteral route. You can think of this one as the express lane. It's all in the name, really. Parenteral literally means beside the intestine. It's any route that completely sidesteps the digestive system. And yeah, most of the time, we're talking about an injection.
So why take this express lane? Well, sometimes you just have to. Maybe the drug would get completely obliterated by stomach acid. Or maybe it's an emergency and you need that medicine to work now, not in 30 minutes. Or, the patient might be unconscious and physically unable to swallow anything.
And even with injections, it's not one size fits all. It's all about controlling speed. You need an immediate, powerful effect. You go intravenous or IV, straight into the bloodstream. Boom, instant action. But what if you want a slower, more sustained release? Then you go deeper into the muscle with an intramuscular shot. And just under the skin, subcutaneous is even slower and more predictable. And for something like an allergy test, an intradermal shot puts the drug in the very top layer of skin for the slowest absorption possible. Now, this express route is incredibly powerful, but, and it's a big but, it's got some serious downsides. Yes, it's fast and reliable, but it's also more expensive, you need a trained professional to administer it, and once that dose is in, you can't get it back out. Plus, anytime you break the skin, there's always a higher risk of infection. All right, so we have our two main highways, the scenic route and the express lane. How in the world did doctors choose? Well, it all comes down to one simple thing: the destination. Or more precisely, the kind of effect the medicine needs to have. First up, you might want what's called a local effect. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You want the medicine to work right where you put it and nowhere else. Think about an anti-itch cream for a bug bite or medicated eye drops for an infection. The whole point is to treat one specific spot. But usually, you need a systemic effect.
This is when the medicine has to get into your bloodstream so it can travel through your entire body to reach its target. The perfect example is a painkiller for a headache. You don't rub the pill on your head, right? You swallow it, it gets into your blood, and your circulatory system acts like a delivery service, taking it right where it needs to go.
And that, right there, is what ties this all together. The choice of highway, whether it's the slow and steady enteral route or the high-speed parenteral express lane, is 100% determined by the destination. Is the goal local or systemic? That single question changes everything.
So, let's bring this all home. After all that, why does the form, the pill, the liquid, the shot, actually matter so much? Let's put this final, crucial piece of the puzzle into place.
If you take one thing away from all this, let it be this. The form of a medicine is never an accident. It's never arbitrary. A pill isn't a pill just because it's convenient, and a shot isn't a shot just to be difficult. Every single form is a brilliant, highly engineered solution to a very specific delivery problem.
You can almost think of it like a 3-step checklist. Number 1, what's the goal? A local or a systemic effect? 2, what are the challenges? Do we need to worry about stomach acid, or do we need it to work super fast? And 3, what's the solution? Which highway and which specific vehicle is going to get the job done right?
You know, the source material we used for this explainer summed it up perfectly with this quote. The dosage form, the pill, the liquid, it affects how fast it works, how long it lasts, and how much of the drug actually gets to where it needs to go. It is a masterclass in biological engineering, plain and simple.
So the next time you open your medicine cabinet, I want you to just take a second and really look at it. Don't just see a pill or a bottle of liquid. See the solution. Ask yourself, what journey was this thing designed for? What incredible problem was it built to solve? Thanks for joining me on this one.
Have you ever really thought about it? You take a pill for a headache, and somehow it just knows where to go. How does it do that? Well, it's not magic. It's actually this incredible science called drug delivery. We're going to break down exactly how your medicine navigates the superhighways inside your body to get to the right spot.
Okay, to kick things off, let's start with a real-world medical puzzle. Picture this. A patient has a really nasty gut infection, but they can't swallow the pill that would fix it. Now, the doctor has the exact same drug, but in a form they can give through an IV. Problem solved, right? You'd think so. But nope. In this case, the IV version would be totally useless. So what gives? How is that even possible? So here's the specific situation. The infection is called C. diff, and it's a bacteria that causes some serious inflammation in the colon. The go-to treatment is a strong antibiotic, vancomycin. The big problem, though, is that C. diff can make you so nauseous that swallowing a pill and keeping it down is pretty much impossible. And yet, giving that same vancomycin through an IV just doesn't work. This little paradox is the key to understanding, well, everything else we're about to talk about.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to solve that pill's paradox. Then we'll look at the 2 main paths a drug can take in the body. After that, we'll follow the journey of a regular pill, see what options we have beyond the pill, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with why choosing the right route is so incredibly important.
So this first problem isn't just some random brain teaser. It's actually the perfect way to unlock the big, fundamental principle behind all drug delivery. Once you get why that IV vancomycin fails, the rest of this is going to click right into place for you.
The solution to our whole paradox boils down to a really simple but critical fact. Our body basically has 2 main highways for medicine, and these 2 highways lead to very different places. A drug that's designed for one highway can't just hop on the other and expect to arrive at the same destination.
And here they are, our 2 highways. The first one is called enteral. That's just a fancy word for anything that involves the gut. So we're talking about pills, liquids you swallow, that kind of thing. The second one is parenteral, and that means it bypasses the gut completely. Think injections, skin patches, inhalers. Here's a good way to think about it. The enteral route is like standard mail. It has to go through the main post office, get sorted, and then sent out. The parenteral route, that's a direct courier. It skips the post office and goes straight into the delivery network.
And this brings us to our first major clue, the local effect. This is when a drug works right where you put it. A perfect example is an antacid. You swallow it, and it goes right to work on the acid in your stomach. It doesn't need to go for a joyride through your bloodstream. And, you guessed it, this is the answer to our puzzle. Oral vancomycin works because it stays right inside the gut, acting locally to kill the C. diff bacteria exactly where the infection lives.
Now, the total opposite of that is a systemic effect. This is when a drug gets absorbed into your bloodstream and then gets carried all over your body to find its target. It's how a painkiller you swallow can fix a headache. IV vancomycin has a systemic effect. It gets injected straight into the blood, circulates everywhere except the one place it needs to be, inside the gut. It never actually comes into contact with the C. diff bacteria. So for this infection, you absolutely need a local effect, not a systemic one.
Okay, now that we've got that mystery solved, let's dig a little deeper into the most common drug route there is, the journey of a simple pill.
You know, for a solid pill to get into your system and do its job, it actually has to go through 4 key steps. First, obviously you swallow it. Then, once it hits your stomach, it has to disintegrate. That means it breaks apart into tiny little pieces. Next, those little pieces have to dissolve into the fluid in your gut, and only then, once it's fully dissolved, can the last step, absorption, happen. That's when the drug molecules finally pass through the gut wall and into your bloodstream.
And that whole process really explains the pros and cons of taking a pill. I mean, the biggest pro is just how easy it is, right? That's why it's the most common way to take medicine. But that convenience has its downsides. The super harsh acid in our stomachs can actually destroy some drugs. What you've eaten can mess with how well it's absorbed. And because of all those steps we just talked about, it's a relatively slow way to get medicine into your system. And of course, it's a total no-go if someone can't swallow or is throwing up.
So what do we do when taking a pill just isn't an option? Well, that's when doctors open up the parenteral toolkit. It's a whole collection of different methods designed to just bypass the gut altogether and get the medicine where it needs to go more directly.
When speed is everything, nothing, and I mean nothing, beats an intravenous or IV injection. It just skips all the barriers of the gut and puts the drug right into the bloodstream. And from there, it can get through your entire body in about 20 seconds. That's why it is the absolute gold standard in any emergency where every single second counts.
But what if you don't want that super fast spike? What if you're looking for a more steady, long-lasting effect? Well, for that, we have the intramuscular, or IM route. When a drug is injected deep into a muscle, it kind of forms this little pool, or a depot. The drug then slowly seeps out from this depot into the bloodstream over time. This gives you a much longer, more sustained effect than a direct IV shot.
And if you want the ultimate slow and steady wins the race approach, we've got transdermal patches. You just stick them on your skin and they deliver a tiny, continuous amount of medicine right through the skin and into the bloodstream. This route is absolutely perfect for drugs that need to be given consistently over many hours or even for days at a time.
So, as you can probably tell by now, picking how to give a medicine isn't just about what's easiest. It's a really critical medical decision. It determines how fast a drug will work, how long it's going to last, and sometimes, like with our C. diff example, whether it's going to work at all. So let's just lay it all out one last time. If a doctor needs an immediate, life-saving response, IV is the obvious choice. It kicks in about 20 seconds. For something that's not urgent, where convenience is the main thing, an oral pill is perfect, even if it takes 30 minutes or more to start working. Looking for a sustained release that lasts for a few hours, intramuscular is a great way to go. And for that really long-term, continuous delivery over days, a transdermal patch is the perfect tool for the job.
So from a simple pill to a complex IV drip, the delivery route is always tailored to the specific job that medicine has to do. The next time you take any kind of medicine, just think about it for a second. Is it on a local mission, or is it taking a systemic journey through your whole body? Which highway is it on, and why was that the absolute best path for the job?
Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're diving into something really cool, non-sterile compounding. Now, what is that? Well, think of it as the art and science of creating personalized medicine completely from scratch to fit a patient's exact needs. So let's get right into it. So let me ask you a question. It sounds simple, but the consequences can be, well, pretty serious. What happens when the very medicine that's supposed to make you better is something you just can't take? I mean, what do you do then? Okay, let's put this into a real-world context. Imagine a patient who is prescribed levothyroxine for a thyroid condition. This is a super important, vital medication. But here's the catch. The standard tablets make them so nauseous, so sick, that they just have to stop taking them. All of a sudden, the cure itself has become a huge part of the problem. And believe me, this isn't some rare one-in-a-million thing. It's actually a pretty common dilemma in healthcare. We're talking about a real prescription problem, where that one-size-fits-all approach of mass-produced medicine, it just doesn't work for everyone. And here's the bottom line. The patient isn't getting the treatment they need. Their health is literally on the line. You can't just tell someone to power through it, right? There has to be another way. a different approach to get them that medicine, but in a form their body can actually handle. And that brings us to the solution. This is where the art and science of compounding comes in. You see, this is where pharmacy gets personal. We're moving way beyond just counting pills out of a bottle. We're talking about creating a completely custom-made therapy just for one person. At its core, that's exactly what this is. The fancy term is extemporaneous compounding, but really, all it means is making a specific drug formula right then and there, on demand, for a single individual patient. It's the total opposite of mass production. Think of it more like custom craftsmanship. Now, if you want the official breakdown, the United States Pharmacopoeia gives us the full scope. It's all about combining, admixing, diluting, basically altering a drug in very specific, very scientific ways to create something totally tailor-made. So to be clear, this isn't just, mixing some stuff together in a bowl. It's an incredibly precise and regulated practice. And why would you need to do this? Oh, man, the reasons are all over the place. Think about it. What if a baby needs a dose that's way, way smaller than what's made for an adult? Or what if a patient is allergic to a dye or a preservative in a standard pill? Sometimes you need to turn a solid pill into a liquid, or create a special pain cream with a unique dosage. You might even have to remake a medication that's not even on the market anymore. The applications are just huge. Okay, so how does this actually work? Let's peek behind the curtain, go behind the counter, and check out the specialized tools of the trade. Because this equipment is what makes this whole level of precision possible. And trust me, these are not your average kitchen scales. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with Wang. It's the foundation. On one hand, you've got the old school classic, the Class 3 torsion balance. It's this amazing mechanical marvel of precision. But then you have the modern electronic balances, which have insane sensitivity. They're often kept inside a special shield just to protect them from a tiny draft of air. That's how accurate they have to be. Get a load of this number, 120 milligrams. That is the minimum amount you can weigh on one of those standard torsion balances and still be within an acceptable 5% margin of error. We are talking about unbelievably small, potent amounts of stuff, where every single milligram is critical. And that same need for precision, it applies to liquids too. This is where a really fundamental skill comes in, reading the meniscus. You've probably seen this before. Because of surface tension, the top of a liquid in the skinny tube actually curves down a little. That curve is the meniscus. So to get an accurate reading, you have to get your eyes right down at level with the liquid and read from the very bottom of that curve. It seems like a tiny detail, but it makes a huge, huge difference. All right, so you've measured all your ingredients with pinpoint accuracy. Now what? Well, now you have to combine them. And this is where the art of compounding really shines, using these amazing techniques that have been refined over centuries. First up, we have a technique called trituration. Now, if you've ever used mortar and pestle to grind up spices in your kitchen, you totally get the basic idea. It's all about grinding powders down to reduce the particle size, making them super, super fine. And that's absolutely essential if you want a final product that's smooth and not irritating. Then there's levigation, which kind of takes things a step further. With this technique, you're still grinding the powder, but you do it with a little bit of a liquid, one that the powder is insoluble in, so it doesn't dissolve. What this does is create a really smooth paste, and that ensures that when it's mixed into a cream or an ointment, the final product is going to feel silky and smooth, not gritty. Okay, now this next one might just be the most important technique of the whole bunch, geometric dilution. Here's the deal. Say you have a tiny pinch of your active ingredient and a big pile of a filler powder. You can't just, dump them together and give it a stir. That won't work. Instead, you start with a small amount of drug, you add an equal amount of the filler and mix it up really well. Then you take that mixture and add another equal part of the filler and mix that up. You keep doing this step by step until it's all combined. It's a painstaking process for sure, but it absolutely guarantees that the active drug is perfectly and evenly spread throughout the entire batch. So let's recap. We've seen the problem, we've seen the tools of the trade, and we've walked through the techniques. So what does it all add up to? Well, it all leads to a solution that's as unique as the patient it's made for. The result, when you get right down to it, is both simple and incredibly powerful. By applying all this art and science, a pharmacist can create a custom medication that solves that original problem we talked about. The patient gets the medicine they desperately need, but in a form their body can actually take without getting sick. And the possibilities here are just remarkable. So for that patient we mentioned, the one getting sick from the tablets, The pharmacist could create a liquid oral suspension and even add a custom flavor to it, completely bypassing the problem. But that's not all. It could be a custom strength lotion or cream. It could be a capsule made without the specific filler the patient is allergic to. It could even be a rapid dissolve tablet that just melts in your mouth. So many options. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating thought to chew on. I mean, we live in an age where everything is getting more and more personalized, right? From our nutrition plans to genetic testing. So, doesn't it just make sense that our medicine should be personalized too? Compounding really gives us a glimpse into a future where treatment isn't just prescribed from a list, it's designed for you. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the clean room. We're going to uncover the really high-stakes science behind every single sterile dose of medicine. You'll see how safety is engineered, literally, at a microscopic level. So, have you ever stopped to think about an IV drip? I mean, it just looks like a simple bag of fluid, right? But making sure that what's inside is absolutely 100% safe to go straight into your veins, well, that is a whole different story. It's a massive, complex process. It's basically a war fought against an enemy you can't even see. And yeah, that invisible enemy, we're talking about microbial contamination. See, every one of these, they're called compounded sterile preparations, or CSPs, gives medicine a direct, fast-track ticket right into a patient's bloodstream. And that means there is absolutely zero room for error. We're talking about a situation where a single, tiny microbe can do a ton of damage. All right, so let's really get into the high stakes here. Because in the world of sterile medicine, one tiny little mistake, a microscopic mistake, can have truly devastating consequences for a patient. So for a CSP to be considered safe, it has to check a bunch of really important boxes. It's not just about being sterile, free from bacteria. It also has to be completely free of any tiny physical bits. We're talking microscopic pieces of glass or rubber or even fibers. On top of that, it needs to be pyrogen-free, and we'll get to that in a sec, and isotonic, which just means it has to match the chemistry of your blood. Okay, so those pyrogens I just mentioned, here's the deal. They're basically chemical leftovers from microbes. And here's the really scary part. They dissolve in water, so your standard filters, they don't catch them. They just slip right through. This makes them a huge part of that invisible threat. Because even if you get rid of all the bacteria, these little things can still cause a nasty fever in a patient. So how in the world do you fight an enemy you can't even see? Well, you start by building a fortress, a microscopic fortress. And that means engineering an environment that is just unbelievably, meticulously clean. And the walls of this fortress are built with something called primary engineering controls, or PECs for short. The easiest way to think about these, they're like super-powered industrial-strength air purifiers. They're constantly sucking in the air, scrubbing it, and pushing it through a special HEPA filter. That stands for high-efficiency particulate air to create a workspace that is just pristine. And when I say clean, I mean clean. Let's put this in perspective. The room where the techs just get dressed, the anteroom, that's an ISO class 8, and it's allowed to have over 3.5 million particles floating around in a cubic meter of air. But the actual workstation where the medicine is handled, that's an ISO class 5. It allows just over 3,000 particles. It is literally 1,000 times cleaner inside that little box than it is in the room right outside of it. Just incredible. So inside that super clean workstation, the air itself becomes this invisible protective curtain. In some setups, you have horizontal airflow, where a constant stream of filtered air blows across the workspace, pushing any contaminants away. In others, it's vertical, coming straight down from the ceiling. And there are super strict rules for each one. Like, you can't put anything in the way that would block that clean air from reaching another sterile item. Or in a vertical hood, you can never, ever pass your hand over an open vial. It's all about keeping that sterile zone untouched. Of course, a fortress is only as good as the person guarding it, right? So the next layer of defense is the technician. And they have to go through this incredibly strict, almost ritualistic process to get themselves just as clean as the environment they're about to enter. And this is what that looks like. It's called the garbing procedure. And trust me, it's way more than just throwing on a gown and some gloves. It is a precise, step-by-step dance. All jewelry, makeup, even your phone, gone. You vigorously scrub your hands and forearms, way up to the elbows, and every single piece of sterile gear has to be put on in a very specific order to make sure you don't accidentally contaminate anything. It's all about the process. And the precision, it just keeps going. It's not enough to be in the clean space. Where you are inside of it is absolutely critical. This rule here, it says you have to do all your work at least 6 inches inside the workstation. Why? Because the air right at the edge is kind of turbulent. It mixes with the dirtier air from the room. So you have to stay deep inside that protective curtain of clean air. Literally every single centimeter counts. Okay, so the stage is set. The environment is clean, the technician is clean. Now we get to the main event, the actual compounding. This is where all that prep work pays off and the real, delicate work of handling sterile products begins. Now, technicians usually work with 2 main types of containers, vials and ampules. Vials are probably what you picture. They've got that rubber stopper on top that you poke the needle through. Ampules, on the other hand, are these sealed glass containers, and you actually have to snap the neck off to open them. As you can imagine, each one comes with its own set of risks. With vials, you worry about little bits of rubber. With ampules, you're worried about tiny, invisible shards of glass. So let's focus on vials for a second, because one of the biggest risks is something called coring. This is exactly what it sounds like. The needle basically acts like a cookie cutter and punches out a tiny little piece, a core, of the rubber stopper. And where does that little piece go? Yep, straight into the sterile medicine. That's a huge contamination problem, and it's why there's a very, very specific technique to avoid it. And this just shows you the insane level of detail we're talking about. You don't just jam the needle in there, no way. To prevent that coring, you have to place the needle with the bevel, that's the slanted pointy tip, facing up. Then you go in at a 45-degree angle, and as you press down, you smoothly bring the needle up to 90 degrees. It's more of a slicing motion than a punching motion. It's this one tiny, brilliant move that keeps the rubber stopper intact. All right, so the dose is prepared. Mission accomplished, right? Not quite. The job isn't done until it passes one last super important step. This is the final rigorous inspection, the last line of defense before that medicine ever gets near a patient. Every single dose gets a thorough look over. They check for leaks, any weird color changes, and of course they triple check that the label is perfect. But the most critical part, I think, is when they hold it up against both a black background and a white one. They are looking for anything floating in there, any tiny speck that could be a bit of rubber from coring or some other contaminant. It has to pass every single one of these checks or it doesn't leave the room, period. So the next time you see an IV bag, maybe you'll see it a little differently. You'll see the science that's hiding in plain sight. From the air that's 1,000 times cleaner than the room you're in, to the careful step-by-step ritual of getting dressed, all the way down to the exact 45-degree angle of a needle, it's this entire incredible multi-layered defense system that makes modern sterile medicine not just work, but work safely. It's a hidden world of precision, and it's there to protect every single patient, every single time.
Today, we're going on a pretty incredible and kind of hidden journey. We're going to follow a single, tiny pill from the very moment you swallow it and uncover the epic mission it has to undertake once it's inside your body. You ready? Let's dive right in.
I mean, it seems so simple, right? You take a pill and hopefully you feel better. But what on earth is happening in between? While I can tell you it's not magic, it is a highly complex mission, and it's filled with all kinds of obstacles, gatekeepers, and a very, very specific target.
See, the entire goal of any medication is to deliver the right drug in just the right amount to the right place in your body at exactly the right time. That special target is called the site of action. It's the one specific spot where that drug needs to land to actually do its job. So how does the drug even know what to do when it gets there? Well, it all comes down to a really cool and simple idea, the lock and key model. Just picture your body cells as having millions of tiny little locks on their surface. We call those receptors. The drug molecule, that's the key, and it's designed to fit a very specific lock, to either turn it on or sometimes to block it completely. And these little drug keys work in 2 main ways. First, you have agonists. These are the keys that fit the lock, turn it, and activate the receptor. They trigger the cell to do something, like speed up your heart rate. Then you have antagonists. These keys fit perfectly into the lock, but they don't turn it. They just sit there, basically jamming the lock so no other keys can get in and activate it. So, this whole mission, this grand adventure, can be broken down into 4 distinct phases. And scientists have a handy little acronym to remember them. ADME. That stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So let's follow our pill through each stage of its journey.
Okay, first up, the drug has to actually get into the system. This is phase 1, absorption. Before a drug can go anywhere or do anything, it has to get from inside that pill into your body's main highway system, your bloodstream.
And this is a crucial point. Until a drug is absorbed, it isn't really in your body in a useful way. It's just passing through. This whole process is about moving that active ingredient out of the pill and into your blood. And believe me, it is a lot tougher than it sounds.
The very first obstacle course is your stomach, and it is a pretty hostile environment. I mean, the acid alone can destroy some drugs. Food can get in the way, and even the speed at which your stomach empties can totally change how much of the drug makes it to the intestines, which is where most of the absorption actually happens. This is exactly why some pills have a special coating, and why your pharmacist might tell you to take one pill with food and another one on a totally empty stomach.
But wait, even if it escapes the stomach, there is a massive gatekeeper waiting, the liver. See, the blood from your gut goes straight to the liver, which acts like a big processing plant. It starts to break down or metabolize a chunk of many drugs before they even get a chance to reach the rest of the body. This is called first-pass metabolism, and it can seriously reduce a drug's power right from the get-go.
Okay, so let's assume our little drug warriors survive the stomach and the liver's first pass. It's finally in the bloodstream. This kicks off phase 2, distribution. This is where the drug gets to travel the superhighways of your circulatory system to find its final destination.
Distribution is all about that drug moving from the blood out into the body's tissues. The goal here is to get off the highway at the right exit and travel that last mile to get to the site of action.
But not all destinations are created equal. Organs that have a really rich blood supply, like your heart, your liver, and your kidneys, they're going to get a high concentration of the drug really fast. But tissues with less blood flow, like fat and skin, they'll get it much more slowly.
And there's another kind of traffic jam to think about: protein binding. A lot of drug molecules will temporarily hitch a ride on proteins floating around in your blood. Now, while they're attached, they're way too big to leave the bloodstream, so they're basically inactive. Only the free, unbound drug molecules can actually get off at their exit and go to work.
All right, so our drug made it to the target, it did its job, mission accomplished? Well, not quite. Now the body's cleanup crew has to come in and take over. This brings us to the final phases, metabolism and excretion.
And we're back to the liver, the body's main processing plant. This is where metabolism mostly happens. Enzymes in the liver chemically transform the drug into new substances called metabolites. And usually, these metabolites are inactive, and more importantly, they're much easier for the body to get rid of.
The speed of this cleanup process is measured by something called a drug's half-life. It's simple. If a drug has a half-life of, say, 8 hours, it means that after 8 hours, half of the drug that was in your blood is now gone. This is literally what determines how long a drug's effects last and how often you need to take another dose. So, where do all those metabolites go? Well, they get sent to the body's final disposal system, the kidneys. This is excretion. Your kidneys are constantly filtering your blood, and they're designed to pull out these drug metabolites and eliminate them from your body through your urine.
So, after that entire crazy journey, surviving the stomach, the liver's first pass tax, protein binding, how much of the drug actually made it to do the work? Well, this is how we measure the mission success, using two really key concepts: bioavailability and bioequivalence.
Bioavailability basically answers a simple question: what percentage of the drug you actually took survived the whole journey and made it into your bloodstream ready to work? You can think of it as the drug's final score on its report card.
Now take a look at this example. A drug that's given intravenously, so directly into the blood, has 100% bioavailability. That's just by definition. Nothing gets lost. But the exact same drug, levothyroxine, when you take it as a pill, has a bioavailability of only about 50%. Why? Because of all those hurdles we just talked about.
So what does that 50% really mean in the real world? Well, it means that if a patient was getting a 50 microgram dose through an IV in the hospital, they would need a 100 microgram oral tablet at home to get the exact same amount of active drug into their system. It's an absolutely critical calculation for doctors and pharmacists. This brings us to that big question about brand name versus generic drugs. So when two drugs have the exact same active ingredient in the exact same amount and form, they're called pharmaceutical equivalents. But does that automatically mean they work the same way in your body?
The FDA's standard for this is called bioequivalence, and it means that if a generic drug can prove its bioavailability, both the amount and the speed it's absorbed is not significantly different from the brand name drug, they're considered interchangeable. You can trust that they're going to have the same effect.
So there you have it. From a simple pill to a complex, multi-stage mission through your body's internal landscape. It's a really amazing process of chemistry and biology all working together. The next time you take a medicine, maybe you'll pause for a second and think about the incredible journey it's about to undertake.
Have you ever stopped to think about why a simple pill can be a total game changer for one person, but do absolutely nothing, or worse, cause problems for someone else? It's a huge question, and the answer is way more interesting than you might think. So let's get into it. I mean, this scenario right here says it all. A simple aspirin. For you, it works great. For your mom, it's an upset stomach. Your uncle has a serious reaction, and your dad barely feels it. So what's the deal? Why the huge difference? Well, to really solve this mystery, we've got to look at it from 3 different angles. First, we have to look at you, your unique biology. Second, we need to consider your current health, what's going on inside your body right now. And third, we have to look at everything else you're putting into your body, from other medications to the food on your plate. All right, so let's start with the most important factor of all, you. The simple fact is we're all different, and that's the #1 reason why drugs don't work the same for everybody. Think about it. Our bodies are always in flux, and our ability to process medicine changes right along with them. For a newborn, their little liver and kidneys are still getting up to speed. Then, and you might not expect this, young kids can actually burn through some drugs faster than adults. Adolescence, of course, throws a hormonal wrench into everything before things settle down into a long, slow decline through our adult years. And then for the elderly, the whole system tends to slow down right when they're often taking more pills than ever, which, is a recipe for complications. So beyond just your age, there's an even deeper factor at play, your DNA. This is where this amazing field called pharmacogenomics comes in. You can think of it like reading your body's personal instruction manual for medications. It helps us see how you're literally programmed to handle a drug before you even take it. And check out this number. This shows you just how big a deal your genetics are. Up to half of the reason a drug works or doesn't is written in your genes. It's not a small piece of the puzzle. It's a massive one. It's the key to truly personalizing medicine. And the list of personal factors just keeps going. Gender, with differences in hormones and body fat, plays a role. Pregnancy completely changes the game. Your body weight can affect how a drug spreads through your system. And then there's the wild one, your own mind. The placebo effect is real, and it shows that what we believe can actually change how we feel. Okay, so we've got our baseline biology. But on top of that, your health right now adds a whole other layer of complexity. Any disease you might have can totally change the way a drug acts inside your body. Just look at the thyroid. It's a perfect example. If your thyroid is underactive, it's like your body's slamming on the brakes, slowing down how you process drugs. But if it's overactive, it's like hitting the accelerator, and your body chews through medication way too fast. Same drug, 2 completely different outcomes, all because of one health condition. Now the liver, that's the body's main chemical processing plant. Its job is to break down medications. So you can imagine if it gets damaged from a disease like cirrhosis, it can't do its job. And that means drugs can build up to some really dangerous levels. And it's a similar story with the kidneys. They're the cleanup crew, the filtration system that gets drugs out of your body. If they're not working at 100%, medication can stick around for way too long, potentially causing toxic effects. That's why doctors are always adjusting doses for people with kidney issues. Okay, so we've talked about you and your health. The final piece of the puzzle comes from the outside world, from other pills you might be taking to what you had for lunch.
To get how drugs can mess with each other, let's use a simple analogy. Picture the proteins in your blood as seats on a bus, and the drugs are all the passengers trying to get on. Now, most drugs need to grab a seat to travel around your body. It's the free passengers, the ones without a seat, that are actually doing the work.
So here's where it gets really important. Look at the blood thinner warfarin. Almost all of it, 98%, is bound to seats on the bus. That means only 2% is free and active. But what if another drug comes along and kicks just 2% of those warfarin passengers off their seats? Well, you've just gone from 2% free to 4% free. You've doubled the amount of active drug in the system. That's a 100% increase. And that can have huge consequences, like serious bleeding. On top of fighting for seats, some things can actually change the speed of the liver's whole assembly line. So-called inducers, like stuff in cigarette smoke. They hit the fast forward button, clearing drugs out too fast and making them less effective. Then you have inhibitors, which are like throwing a wrench in the gears. They slow everything down, letting other drugs build up and up. And when drugs do combine, they can do it in a few different ways. An additive effect is simple math. 1 + 1 = 2. But synergism is where things get wild. That's when 1 + 1 = 3. Aspirin and warfarin together is a classic example. And potentiation is when one drug that does nothing on its own acts like a superpower booster for another one. And it's not just other drugs you have to think about. Believe it or not, your diet can actually tune your metabolism. A high-protein diet tends to speed things up, while a diet high in carbs can slow things down. And some food interactions are just plain dangerous. This is why you hear those warnings, and they are no joke. Eating aged cheese if you're on a certain kind of antidepressant can send your blood pressure soaring. All that healthy spinach you're eating, it can actually work against your blood thinner. And my favorite? The calcium in a glass of milk can literally grab onto an antibiotic like tetracycline and make it so your body can't absorb it at all. Your pill becomes useless. So, you take your genetics, your health, your diet, other drugs, you throw them all together in a big pot, and when they combine in just the wrong way, we get what everyone calls side effects. The official term is an adverse drug reaction, or ADR. It's really just a catch-all for any unintended, unwanted effect you get from a medication. It's the real-world result of all these complex interactions we've just been talking about. And these reactions can look like a lot of different things. An allergy is your immune system basically freaking out. Then you have something called an idiosyncratic reaction, which is just a really unexpected, weird response that's often tied to your unique genes. Some drugs can be toxic to the liver or kidneys, and of course there are the super common stomach issues. And sometimes your body just gets used to a drug and you build up a tolerance. So, understanding all of this isn't just a cool science lesson, it's fundamentally changing the future of medicine and moving us away from that old one-size-fits-all model. So here's the bottom line. A drug's effect is never simple. It's a really complex equation. The pill is just one part of it. The biggest and most important variable in that whole equation is you. And all this knowledge is paving the way for something that sounds like science fiction, truly personalized medicine. It leaves us with a pretty powerful thought, doesn't it? What if the next time you got a prescription, it wasn't designed for just anyone, but it was designed specifically for you, right down to your DNA? Have you ever looked at a prescription from your doctor and just thought, what on earth am I even looking at? It can feel like you're trying to read a completely foreign language. Well, today, we're going to crack that code. We're decoding something you've probably seen 100 times, but maybe never really fully understood: the names of your medications. Right? You get that little slip of paper and the names just look like a total jumble of letters. Amoxicillin, lisinopril, atravascetin. It feels intentionally confusing, but I promise you it's not. There's actually a hidden logic, a kind of secret language baked right into these names. And to show you exactly how this works, we're not just going to talk theory. Nope, we are going to solve a real-world case. We're going to follow a guy named Steven and a prescription he just got from his dentist. So let's meet Steven. He's just gone through a root canal. Ouch. And his dentist handed him a prescription for 2 different medications to help him recover. The big question is, why these 2 specific drugs? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, so here it is. This is Steven's prescription. The dentist gave him amoxicillin to handle any potential infection and ibuprofen to manage the pain and inflammation. Now, on the surface, those are just 2 names. But what do they really tell us about what they do and, how they actually work? To really get what's going on with Steven's prescription, we have to crack the naming code first. See, a drug doesn't just get one name. It actually goes on this whole journey, and each name it gets serves a very different purpose. It all kicks off with this super complex chemical name. It's basically the drug's atomic recipe. Totally useless for you and me. But then, as it shows promise, it gets an official, non-proprietary name. That's what we call the generic name. A special counsel actually approves it to make sure it's unique and, pronounceable. And then finally, the company that makes it slaps a catchy, trademarked brand name on it for marketing. So here's the absolute key takeaway. There is only one official generic name for a drug's active ingredient, like ibuprofen. But there can be a ton of different brand names for that exact same drug, like Motrin or Advil. For our decoding mission today, that generic name, that's the one we care about. All right, now that we know to focus on the generic name, let's get to the really cool part. I want you to think of this next bit of info as your own secret decoder ring for your medicine cabinet. To use it, we just need to understand something called drug classes. A drug class is simply a family of medicines. It's just a way of grouping drugs together that do similar jobs in the body or work in a similar way. You know, think of it like sorting tools in a toolbox. All the hammers go in one spot, all the screwdrivers go in another. Same idea. And here's where the magic happens. That council that approves the generic names, they often embed a common syllable, which is called a stem, right into the name. And that stem tells you which family or class the drug belongs to. It's a clue hidden in plain sight. Check it out. This is our decoder ring in action. If you see the stem psilin at the end of a drug name, boom, you know it's a penicillin-type antibiotic. See statin? That's a drug that lowers cholesterol. And Olol tells you it's a beta blocker, which is often used for heart conditions or blood pressure. It's like a built-in cheat sheet. Okay, team, we've got our decoder ring, we know the difference between generic and brand names, and we know to look for those sneaky little stems. It is time. Let's go back to Steven and finally solve his dental dilemma. All right, let's start with the first drug on his list, amoxicillin. This is the generic name, right? So it's the one that just might hold a clue for us. And right away, there it is. Do you see it? Look at the end of the name, amoxicillin. That is the first stem we learned from our brand new decoder ring. So that psilin stem tells us this drug belongs to the penicillin family of antibiotics. And what do antibiotics do? They fight bacterial infections. It makes perfect sense that a dentist would prescribe this after a root canal to stop any potential infection in its tracks. The name itself told us its job. How cool is that? Okay, one down, one to go. Easy peasy. Now let's look at the second drug on the list, ibuprofen. Now, ibuprofen doesn't have an obvious stem from our little beginner's decoder ring, but it belongs to a very, very common and important drug class called NSAIDs. That stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Non-steroidal just means it works differently than steroids, which are another kind of anti-inflammatory. This is a huge family of pain relievers. And just like the name of its class suggests, its job is to fight two things: pain, which makes it an analgesic, and inflammation. After a dental procedure like a root canal, what do you have? You got it, pain and swelling. An NSAID is the perfect choice to tackle both. And just like that, case solved. Steven's prescription is no longer a mystery at all. The amoxicillin is there to fight off infection, and the ibuprofen is there to take care of the pain and inflammation. By understanding this secret language of drug names and classes, we uncovered the entire story behind his trip to the pharmacy. So look, this was more than just a fun little puzzle with Steven. Cracking his prescription gives you a powerful new toolkit for understanding your own health and your own medications. So what's in your new toolkit? Well, first, you now know that crucial difference between a generic name and a brand name. Second, you can start looking for those stems, and you'll be amazed how often you see them now. This means you can ask your doctor or pharmacist smarter questions like, hey, I see this is a beta blocker, just like my other medication. How are they different? It totally transforms you from just a passive recipient into an active, informed partner in your own healthcare. It's a game changer. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. The next time you see a prescription, or even just look at a box of over-the-counter medicine, take a closer look at that generic name. You have the tools now. I bet you can crack the code.